Hi, this is Dr. Carl Goldkamp. If you're interested in learning about the ketogenic diet like I was, to save my own life, then this is probably the podcast for you. 8 years ago, I knew nothing about it. 6 years ago, it saved my life. 3 years ago, I started researching and talking with some of the authorities in the field and attending medical conferences about this to understand why and how keto so dramatically changed my and my wife's Judy's lives. The purpose of this podcast is to share our journey of discoveries with you in understanding how keto is so effective in improving so many different conditions, from obesity, epilepsy, diabetes, infertility, MS, Alzheimer's, heart disease, to name a few. So take a step away from all the hype you've probably heard and roll up your sleeves with me and join me weekly to explore this living miracle that anyone can access. We'll talk science, we'll talk food. We'll explore its history and evolution to today, which is that the sheer wonder of the ketogenic way of eating has changed untold number of lives, unlike anything before it. And in case I forget to mention it, please join our Facebook group, Keto Naturopath. Welcome back to the next episode of the Keto Naturopath. This is Dr. Goldkamp. Today we're going to do something fun. And that is, we're going to do a follow-up conversation about somebody who has tried the protein-sparing modified fast and to listen to his experiences. And they were good and they were bad. And it's just good to have this put in a real context of a real person doing it. Not everything works out as you think, but what you need to do is try, see what happens, adjust, modify, and then try it again. And that's exactly what we're doing here. So the guest you well know from many podcasts is Brian, our audio guy, way back when known as Keto Newbie, no longer a newbie, but fascinating story coming up. So Brian, welcome to the show, and let's hear about this.
Well, thank you, Carl. I always appreciate being back on here with you guys. It's always a good time. I guess long story short, I was, kind of interested in what was going on with the protein sparing fast. I had come up more than once or twice in the Facebook group and in previous episodes. And, I wanted to give it a try. I kind of more or less hit all of my personal goals with, ketogenic diet up until recently, and figured, hey, why not? Let's give it a shot.
Absolutely. So when did you start this, and what did you do? Did you do any preparation? So here you are, Brian, say, hey, this is really cool. I want a piece of this action too. And so what'd you do?
Pretty simple. I took a couple of notes in terms of what foods you were recommending. And all the prep I really did was just go out to the grocery store, buy a couple of items. I had only planned to do it for maybe 4 days max. So for me, I didn't have to really have very much to do, outside of, make sure that I just got my butt in the kitchen and just, cooked a couple meals for myself.
Okay, so what did you get at the grocery store? What foods did you pick up?
Sardines. It was 95% lean ground beef, pork chops, and eggs. Kept it pretty simple.
All right, excellent. I'm trying to think of what we usually have. So you didn't pick up any skinless chicken or anything. You just kept it to the list that you had.
No, I didn't do any chicken. I didn't really have many options. It was mostly like thigh or drumsticks with the skin on it and stuff like that.
Got it. Got it. Okay, so when did you start this?
I started on Friday. This was Friday of last week, and I was able to do all of Friday, all of Saturday, all of Sunday, and Sunday is when I ran into a little bit of trouble.
Okay, well, let's go back to Friday. What did you actually do on Friday?
95% lean ground beef. I got a total of 75 grams or 75.5 grams of protein in that day. That was the only meal that I had that day. It was a very busy work day for me.
Okay, and so do you know what your protein requirement is on a daily basis for your ideal body weight? I mean, it's pretty easy to calculate. Have you done that?
Yeah, it's 91.5 grams.
Okay, we'll call it 90. All right, so you were under. So for a protein sparing fast, you were on the fasting side of protein, right? Just for the record.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. Okay. How I like to line it up, and we'll go through this, is like, yeah, certainly eat your minimum. I don't have an upside. Said eat as much as protein as people can possibly want, which is usually not very much once they get to be able to do that. But we don't want to be under it. Okay, so that was Friday. So how'd you sleep that night?
That was Friday night was business as usual for me. Sometime around like 9:15 ish, I started getting pretty tired. If I don't make it to my bed by 10 o'clock, I'm in trouble. I was in bed by 10 and I was out like a light probably by 10:30, 11 o'clock.
Okay, good. And so when you woke up, no big deal? I mean, you're just another normal day, ready to go? Now it's Saturday.
Yeah, just a normal day. I do the same thing that I do every Saturday when I'm not working, which is I'll wake up and decide that I want to stay in bed a little bit longer and prolong that first cup of coffee. And that always that's always trouble for me. But I was out of bed by probably 9, 10 o'clock, and I kind of attributed any grogginess that I had to me deciding not to make that first cup of coffee till maybe 11:30 that day. So
Hmm.
that was basically my Saturday. Wasn't too out of the ordinary for me considering.
Okay, nothing bad to report on that day. What did you eat for Saturday?
Saturday, I had a can of sardines in the morning, and then I had 12 ounces of pork chops later on in the evening. I cut all the fat off of it. No visible fat was eaten, and I hit 119 grams that day.
Great. So that was a great day. Good. It was well within what I would consider the target, kind of making sure you got enough of what you need. Well,
Mhm.
good. And anything to report in terms of sleep or quality or any sort of behavioral changes, or you're feeling good and just going on with life?
For the most part, that was a day where I chose to have another cup of coffee again at around 3 o'clock, and then again at about 6 or 7 o'clock, which is not very common for me for weekends. I'm not sure if it had anything to do with me feeling like I didn't rest well or whatever the case was, but I just felt like I needed a little bit more go. I was basically on the coffee train pretty much all day, which is on the more uncommon side for me, even though I do drink a lot of coffee.
Hmm. Good. So far, it doesn't sound like a lot of coffee, but it sounds okay. I hear what you're saying. All right. So on to the next day, which is now Sunday, right? Your third day.
Yes, Sunday. Sunday was the day that gave me trouble. I'm looking at my numbers for Sunday, and I can very clearly see what the issue here was. But Sunday, I had 10 egg whites and a half a can of sardines, which totaled 47 grams of protein. 47 grams, which is really not very much. And I noticed a lot of my Sunday was a lot different from Friday and Saturday in terms of how I was feeling and what I was going through. That day, I decided to actually get some exercise in. So I did get some exercise in. I'm not sure if me feeling tired during that day was a result of that and maybe not eating enough. I'm not sure. But that night, I had a very difficult time going to bed. So much so that I was incredibly groggy on Monday. I didn't really feel like I had any kind of restful sleep at all. And I actually had to stop the protein, or I chose to stop the protein sparing fast on Monday. Um, be it a combination of exercising the day before, not eating enough, or me just working a pretty brutal day that day. I don't know what it was, but around 1, 2 p.m. Monday, that's when I said, okay, you know what? I'm not feeling very comfortable right now in my current state. And I think I'm just going to pedal it back and just go back to my regular thing.
Makes sense. So give us your weight numbers, which is really the reason why people do this. What transpired there? Where were you? Were you tracking your weight each day?
Uh, I started at 171.4.
Yep.
The next day, when I weighed myself, I was at, hold on, I was at 168.7.
And what's your height, Brian?
We're going with 5'6".
You're going with five
We're going with
six.
5'6" for my.
Okay. So you're 66 inches. Okay. All right. While you do your work, I'll check
Okay.
mine, and I'll go through my calculations here. Gotcha. So what do you consider your ideal body weight? According to this, I'm looking on ideal body weight, 5'6", 66 inches. It is somewhere between, I'm doing round numbers, 120 and 150. The middle of that would be 135. What do you consider your ideal body weight?
My ideal, I mean, at this point, I'd say I'm probably closer to 145 for
Okay.
ideal body weight. what, 135 pounds. That was my initial varsity wrestling weight my senior year of high school. I
Well,
can't
that's
can't
what they
imagine I'd ever get back there.
that's what they call ideal. Well, bite your tongue. We have on the end of this conversation. We'll talk about that. So anyway, by your numbers, you have roughly 26 pounds you'd like to lose to get to your call it normal weight of 145, right?
Yeah, I'd say so. I would say so.
Okay. So, all right. So anyway, we're into without too much calculation. So we got weight to lose. You've lost. Let's just jump to the end. How much weight did you lose by Sunday or Monday, or since it's just last Monday?
By Monday morning, it was 8.1 pounds.
So you lost 8 pounds within really three days: Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Yeah,
Um,
pretty much. I mean, the first time I was on the scale was that Friday, and then the last time was that Monday morning. That was the last
mm,
time. So I did
mm.
actually have that whole evening period.
What's interesting about that, in the world of, we've most of us have done our own fasting, at some point, got deep into fasting about a year or so ago, and you don't lose. I don't think you lose anything more than that on a straight fast. I'd have to go back and compare numbers, but um, that's interesting. So now you've protected your protein. That's why they call it protein modified sparing fast. So you're having your protein, so you're not going to be losing any protein. You're not going to be specifically, so people think about muscle mass, which is mostly what this is about. So you're protecting that, and yet your weight loss is still the same. That's an interesting aside.
That
Okay.
that is really interesting considering, I mean, the only day that was quote unquote tough for me was Sunday, but compared to previous experiences that I've had with just straight fasting, this was a lot more manageable for me, and I felt like this was definitely a much more enjoyable experience compared to me feeling the way that I felt when I was just straight fasting when I had given that a shot.
hmm So if we hadn't spoken until now, or even a day or so ago when we spoke, is like, would you look back and go, yeah, it was pretty doable, but I didn't like the way it ended up. I felt lousy. Tell us, I mean, because it sounds like Monday was, you just didn't like it. You were tired, you were logy, you quit. And, but I mean, you got some benefits from it. Why is that right? Your last day was like, well, this sucks. This is not what I want to continue doing.
I mean, yeah, pretty much. But I mean, it would be disingenuous of me to look at what I had entered into Chronometer and what I saw on the scale and what I was doing with myself, and saying that I didn't really make a mistake. I actually want to go ahead and give this another try, after a few more days of just going back to my regular thing, just because I feel like I didn't really give this the real opportunity. I feel like I just didn't give it a real shot.
hmm
I kind of fudged this one a little bit, and I feel like I'm not happy with what I actually did with it. I definitely would do some things differently were I to try this again.
How much have you gained back since Monday? So this is now Sunday we're speaking. It's going to be a week tomorrow. How much have you gained back of was it the 7 pounds, 7+ pounds that you lost?
Yeah, as of this morning, so my lowest weight that I recorded was 163.3, and as of this morning, I am 166.2. So I've
Hmm.
gained three pounds essentially back since then.
Well, that was a pretty quick win. And when you gained it back, what has your diet been subsequent? I mean, and the reason I ask is some people, and this is why I really don't like getting into fasting much in terms of a therapeutic benefit for people, because it really draws the addictive personality. Like I can have a terrible diet, but I can atone. It goes along for that really religious extreme person. I will atone for my sins. I will drop my weight, and I'll be back to my high school wrestling weight, and they go too far, and it's a bit too dangerous metabolically. And so,
Mhm.
what have you had subsequent to that? I mean, did you go out and party, or how did you come back into?
I wouldn't necessarily say that I partied, but it's been a little while. I figured I would take an opportunity to treat myself. So I
Mhm.
did actually have a couple slices of a cauliflower pizza a day ago. Yeah, am I a bad person? Maybe a little bit, but you know what? I'm okay with it.
Yeah, yeah,
but
hardly
uh, but
bad.
no, that's that's really, that was the biggest extent to what I've done. I had some pork rinds,
Yeah.
here or there over the weekend, but that's, that's business as usual as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
For snacking and stupid stuff like that when I actually feel like having it.
Yeah. Well, for the record, what I consider bad is a lot of carbs that are processed foods, maybe a lot of beer, and then a lot of dairy. So that would be clearly off the deep end, saying, that was fine. I tried this little thing, but I'm going back over here. And people do that. That's why the whole fasting thing is like, they feel restricted, and therefore they're going to overreact when they come out of this thing. And that's what they're entitled to.
I really empathize, or rather sympathize with people that actually put themselves through that, because me personally, once I hit that point where, I've been fat adapted for long enough and I decide, oh, hey, let me just go ahead and have pizza or beer or whatever. I wake up the next morning with a full blown carb hangover. I just get
Mhm.
like a terrible headache. I feel awful. Like my joints hurt. I don't know. It's a lot of pain for the reward, in my opinion.
Yeah, yeah.
Air
No,
quotes on
it
reward.
absolutely. I mean, it's also as people get older, by the way, I mean, there is a stratification of, experience on earth with life and what that teaches you, and that tends to accumulate. So if people do nothing, measuring somebody who's 18 versus who's 65 or 75, there's just life experience there that does fit into their thinking. And so I think as people get to be more mature, it's kind of what I was leading up to. They tend to realize, there's a cost to everything. So they tend to see the cost of everything, and they tend not to want to relinquish the gains that they made that easily. That's fine.
Yeah.
So let's put some structure around it. So what you did is you not only did you have a protein sparing modified fast, but you really tried to you used whole food sources. In other words, you didn't go to a protein powder, which would have been 100% only protein, but you used whole food sources, meaning it was a real thing in the world: fish, sardines, pork from pork chops, and beef from the beef from cattle. And so that's a start. And of those choices, you made very lean choices. So you were really squeezing down to as close as you could get to realistically a zero um, protein source, a zero fat source that's mixed in with your protein. Impossible to get to, and that's fine that that's there, but you really focused on, let's make this lean protein sources as opposed to a branched chain amino acids or an amino acid powder that you're going to mix with your coffee every morning and therefore have that be your thing. That's
Yeah. And with all the experience that I've gotten in keto, and being able to get all this information coming in over the course of the last couple of years, I've become a huge proponent for whole food sources whenever I can get them. And I feel like it's the way to go. I try not to talk to people about food quality very often.
yeah.
Although it's become one of those things where like I'll hear myself leaning in that direction when I do speak to people. But I'm now of that fold where if at all possible, get the best possible sources of food, and always whole food as often as possible.
Yeah, no, I think I agree. And there's a lot of reasons for that. And people either buy into it or they don't buy into it. It's like one of those other religions in the world. Just try not to cross that line, otherwise you'll never get out of it.
Yeah.
A polemic that nobody really lets up on. So that's important to see. So most people don't quite get that. They go, "Oh, it's a protein sparing modified fast. Aha, you had some fat in your meat." Well, yeah, you did, but it was a pretty low level. Um, what what I've discovered. So now we actually put this into the last half of our 90-day program. And the first part, we really tell people about having high fat. So we do the high fat, low carb, and make sure, on an accountability basis, they cram in as much fat as possible. On the opposite side, we start pulling that fat away. And I think what's really interesting to sort of see this evolution. And I think it's a very great technique. I hate to call it a hack, but when your body is capable, you then are your own repository, your own supply, your own reserve of fat. And it is just like turning on a faucet. So, I mean, that's extraordinary results. You had 7 pounds of weight loss You gain some back, that's fine. But even on a week average that you lost, that would be a net 4 pounds. That's dramatic, And so the takeaway is if you did this, let's say it was 3 days a week, 4 weeks in a row, that you would probably, if you had the fat to lose, you would probably exceed your 15 or 20, your 10 to 15 pounds of weight loss comfortably and healthfully. And that's the big difference, and that's remarkable. I mean, when I hear people doing this, it's very remarkable. It would happen the way you did it, and should you do it again, my prediction is you won't have the same windfall of 7 pounds. It'll probably be maybe 5 pounds, and then you go back and you eat normally, and then the week after that, it'll probably be maybe 3 pounds. And so as you get down to a narrower and narrower range of what you're actually losing, you'll find that you're feeling very, very tight and healthy. So what do you plan to do with this information? I mean, now that you've discovered this, it was just an experiment in your life, or is this something you plan to use?
This is something that I plan to use. To talk about my old glory days as a wrestler in high school,
Hmm.
one of the things that was introduced to me by a more veteran wrestler was something that we talked about in terms of cutting weight for matches, meets, tournaments, all that stuff. And where most wrestlers, they'll go into it and they'll say, okay, well, I have a week to lose, 8 or 9 pounds before my next match. And, they'll go and they'll do the regular exercise and they'll go on a pretty heavy cut, usually the first couple days before that match actually happens. Well, what ends up happening is they lose all that water weight, they kind of suck themselves completely dry, they step on the scale and they look like ghosts of themselves on the scale. They meet their mark, and then immediately they get off the scale. They're stuffing sandwiches in their face, drinking Gatorade, all that stuff, just trying to pull in as much as they can before they go onto the mat and do their thing.
Hmm.
Well, the way that I was introduced to cutting in a more I guess effective way was to lose the weight early on and then slowly start introducing calories back into my diet until I found that point where I felt comfortable. I could train with intensity. And when the time came for me to step on the scale, I was the weight that I was supposed to be at. I wasn't completely sucked dry because I wasn't quote unquote cutting those last 2 days. And I was full of energy, able to absolutely destroy and do, what it is that I came to do. So the comparison between the guys that I would go up against and myself was like night and day. These guys are basically asleep at the wheel while I was completely alert and actually felt a bunch of energy. Well, fast forward 12 years now, I'm 30 years old. Granted, we can't really train jujitsu right now because of the whole thing going on with the coronavirus. But what I plan to do with the protein sparing modified fast moving forward is actually use this as a tool to get myself into particular weight brackets that I want to compete in for certain divisions, and just do it this way instead of doing what even still at this juncture and even in my particular age group, a lot of people who compete still actually do, which is traditional weight cutting, sucking out the weight, hitting the sauna, running with trash bags, doing all that stuff. When, at the end of the day, it's not a weight loss competition, it's a jujitsu competition. So I want to make sure that I am as fresh as possible for that. So I definitely plan on using the protein sparing fast. I'll know a good 6 to 8 weeks ahead of time if I have a competition coming up. Well, hey, I can start that week. Okay, great. And I can do a few days on, give myself 4 or 5 days, do 3, 4 days on, and then just rinse and repeat until I'm at the weight that I want to be at and I feel comfortable doing my regular stuff. So I can, sneak my way into some divisions that might be a little, quote unquote, light for where I was when I decided I wanted to compete.
Excellent. Excellent. That's a real nice application of using this. Yeah, you did open up the door to the discussion, which is this is what bodybuilders use. I mean, you ever wondered when they get on that
Hmm.
stage and you go, how can anybody have such low fat mass? They're down to are they percent or two, barely above
Oh,
what can support life. This is what they do. So they obviously they spend their life building the muscles, appropriate for however they think it's appropriate. And then they start cutting back and right. And so absolutely start cutting back until they have the cellophane look to all their muscles. They're almost like a cadaver in a way,
Mm.
in the sense that it's that perfect. But no, absolutely. So it's a trick that can be used helpfully. One of the things I wanted to mention, though, is that um, when people talk about this kind of fasting, it's like, oh my gosh, I can have protein, but I can fast and get the same benefits. So yes, end of that sentence, correct. But what happens if you just did this for 3 weeks or 4 weeks, and perhaps you might not have had the fat to be your own repository, is that you will go into a fat deficit, obviously. And if you go into a fat deficit, you're going to be breaking down your protein and other aspects of your body to supply that. And to make this healthy long term, really the focus has to be reminded, so what sort of fats do I need? And there are things called essential fatty acids, your omega 3s, they're really just two. And so you have to be aware long term of these are the fats that I need to have. And should you choose to still be phobic about the word fat and not do that, you will suffer brain damage. You will suffer, you'll first start probably being pretty depressed. And after that, you
Wow.
may induce uh, damage. Your brain is mostly DHA, which is one of the two essential fats. And so if you're going to be deficient on that, and you're not going to supply any sort of, you know, import exogenous fats, that's what diet is, then you're going to be running into damage. And so long term, this is a neat quote unquote hack, but ideally it's going to have to drive each of us to understanding what essential fatty acids are, how to bring them into our diet. So therefore, uh, back to the bodybuilder or the jujitsu guy or woman or whatever, who get, all right, now how do I get these fats? Well, then you would go to something like salmon, a good source of salmon, or make sure you're taking your fish oils, but having it as a food source is far better. So the warning is, when you're fat deficient long term, you will drive neurological damage, which is not insignificant. And so,
Um,
yeah, go ahead.
I actually have 2 questions. So the first one, let's say you are in a fat deficit and your body starts to break down, your protein to get you that. Uh, what what would happen in terms of, things like gluconeogenesis and things like that? Like, or is all of a sudden your blood sugar just going to start spiking like crazy because of what's going on, or is that something that would be more controlled?
No, the gluconeogenesis has already started. So when you actually
Mm,
started this protein fair, so in a protein sparing modified fast, you're ideally having really nothing in terms of no carbs and very little in terms of fat. So when protein comes in, it can initially increase your blood glucose. That's the good news. And that's why in the classic ketogenic diet, I don't know if you remember this, they go, all right, all the carbs and all the proteins are in one group and then the fats in the other group. So they would talk about diets. It would be 4-to-1, meaning the fats versus the carbs and the grams of protein and carbs together. So 4-to-1, 3-to-1, 2-to-1, and that would be in terms of fattiness. So a really fat diet would be a 4-to-1, and so they were working away from, or making it so they had a minimal diet that would create ketones. One is you're eating, minimal diet to create glucose. So you're obviously eating glucose when you eat carbs. That's an easy conversion. But when you eat protein, no, it doesn't automatically go into uh, glucose in your bloodstream. It has to go down to your liver. A number of, your cortisol gets increased in your pancreas and so on, starts that. And so it has to go to the liver to be broken down and then be reformulated, reused. The bits and pieces of your protein are used to then make glucose. So hence the word gluconeogenesis, making new glucose from protein. So it's a slower process. And so that's always ongoing in the background. So that's how you exist on a protein sparing fast. And so now if you go into, you are that guy, that cellophane guy, and you're continuing beyond that, it's going to start drawing on your own vital fat reserves, which are your brain, your nerves, and so on and so forth. So before it was the fat that you wore, the fat that encased your body. That was the good place to take the fat from, but not in terms of our nerves and not in terms of our brain and so on. So it will have, and that'll be one of the places. So it's going to look for fat. It will certainly start to break down your own protein. You're going to, wait a minute, I'm taking protein and it's breaking it down. Um, it's now breaking down protein, not just give you more glucose, it's breaking down protein to make other fat sources. It will never be able to make those 2 essential fatty acids. You have to, hence the word essential. You have to consume those. So it will
Mm.
be it's not, there's no hack for this hack, right? There's no hack for the
Okay.
downside
Okay.
of this hack. Um, and no, your glucose will not go up anymore. You'll start feeling worse. You'll start feeling, gosh, you'll lose your attention span. You'll be not as focused. Um, your energy will be probably questionable. It will not be any less than it was before, but you just won't really be with it. And people will probably notice that about you.
Okay, so this might not be the most educated question, but I have to ask. So, if you do get into that fat deficit place outside of your body eating your muscle mass or your lean mass, is your body just gonna start basically eating your brain and your nerves at that point? Like, is that pretty much what's
That's the
happening?
blunt answer to it. Does it go automatically there, going fat, fat, fat? That's gone. Let's go on to another source of fat. Well, what it's looking for is, so it can make all other sources of fats. So it will break down protein to supply other sources of fats, which are important to the body, but not essential in the sense that you have to consume it. So it in no way, you're now then going to be exacerbating. It's going to try to keep your essential fatty acids, i.e., your brain and your nerves, as your last source. But it's going to then scour those sources of saying, is there other fats in there we can use that might not be, essential? So you're now working on your last reserve, which is this is obviously a lot better than starving. People will die after a month of some fasts, if they've not been fat adapted. Some people have gone longer, and there's lots of records on various people doing different things. But if you're always supplying protein to somebody, and it has to be as a minimum of what your basic needs are, you could probably get a number of months. I mean, I don't think anybody's done extended, as in 3, 6, 12 months of a protein sparing fast only. That would be interesting, but it's probably illegal to do that. But I don't think anybody voluntarily has done that either way. But yeah, you would go there, but you'd be other sources of, your body's going to crave for fats. Among those fats it's craving for are the essential ones, which it won't be able to create. But there are other fats it can break down. It's other proteins it can break down to supply these other fats.
Let's say you were a person that it was in your genetic makeup. Alzheimer's is something that's just in your family. Is there any potential for somebody to exacerbate those things maybe a little earlier than rather prematurely, sooner than they would actually start experiencing those things if they fell into that category and actually were doing something like this and they did it for a little too long
Yeah,
without
no, that's a
without
great question. No, the question is predisposition. Are there people who are predisposed to get worse outcomes sooner than everybody else? And I would have to think yes, because one of the things that is sort of fat related are things like choline, which you only get those from fat sources like egg yolk and liver. So if people aren't having either of those because they're on this, their choline is, when you think of acetylcholine, that's a neurotransmitter, and lack of that acetylcholine, or a receptor problem, is called myasthenia gravis, when people start losing the ability to actually move their limbs because they can't, they don't have the neurotransmitter pick up to initiate the contraction, and so they start to jitter. And so that would be one obvious thing. But choline is um, involved in a lot of other different cycles. So you have that for one, and that's fat related, but it also so that's an essential requirement. You would also, so in addition to uh, the essential fatty acids, you would predispose people who have various mutations that have to do with methylation cycle. And it sounds a little complicated. It's not that complicated, but you can find a common mutations. And so populations would be people who have a history of schizophrenia, bipolar, um, obsessive compulsive disorders, these various mental conditions that Dr. Palmer talked about once I interviewed him. Um, so that would be a population that already has a hard time because of their genetic makeup, being very low on these essential nutrients that you are not bringing in because you're just into protein. So they would be the first to not be able to sustain this kind of diet. And after that, in terms of the Alzheimer's, well, Alzheimer's, for the most part, in my way of hearing that,
is that I hear that really it's a population of people who have some of these mutations. The famous one is called the ApoE4. They're homozygous for it, and even heterozygous has the problems. But um, they would probably, that doesn't directly affect this, but my guess is that that situation would be exacerbated a little bit. So yeah, so these are the things that come out of the woodwork when people just start jumping them to try this. It does work for nearly everybody all the time, but nothing works for everybody all the time, and nothing works for everybody. Um,
Mm.
and so you sort of have to do the larger contextual work. If anybody has a liability, so for me, having a liability of being a physician and recommending these things to people in front of me on a one-on-one, then I have to get an idea, what is their context? How nutritionally healthy are they right now? Do I have a rough understanding of their genomic mutations? And after that's out of the way, then I'm feeling a little freer to have this open conversation with them. But prior to, so when we on the streets mentioned to our friends, and certainly we all did this through wrestling or
Mm.
whatever the weight classes we had to meet in the various sports we did. Yeah, we did those sweat bags. We thought to get the water weight out and really just try to burn that fat. And this is a whole end run around that. What I'm seeing, and I haven't seen this written, what I'm seeing is it almost accelerates a fat loss on a protein sparing fast. As I mentioned earlier on, it's like, I don't quite understand that. How
Mm.
somebody can have, you know, 90 grams, 100 grams of protein a day, which also means a little bit of fat. And so that's 90 times 4, 18 is, it's about, call it about 400 grams. So it's still hypocaloric by a lot. And the average person is probably around 1,500 to 1,600 calories a day. But how they can lose as much or more fat per day or at the end of the 3 days than somebody on a full on fast. That's interesting.
That is really interesting. Thanks for actually going into that. I mean, uh, I feel like that's almost something that you really need to consider, as an important topic when you're looking into this. If you do have some predisposition to anything like that.
It ends up being, I would say, the word harrowing is not too small of a word to use. It's like all you need is to have one of those experiences, somebody to freak out under your recommendation, and you go, "Whoa, uh,
Mhm.
this is pretty dangerous stuff." And consequently, it makes physicians very, very, very conservative. That is, I don't want to. They'll then not recommend this at all in any situation. So I think that's equally um, problematic. So doing a little contextual research is really what a doctor, I believe, is responsible to do. And I have seen people get stuck in the rabbit hole. They think life is good, and they're damaging themselves, and um, they just don't listen. So you got to quickly hold somebody's hand and say, no, we're not doing this. You can't control
No,
you can't control their behavior, but you can tell them that you're not quite in the position other people are to start this.
mm,
Go slowly
no,
and let me know, but people are what people are. But anyways, predisposition
no.
is a big deal. We are not all equal, and I think you hit the bigger point, which is probably why you brought it up. Is that we go with these sort of general ideas that we can all do this. Keto. Why is it only 50% get benefits from keto, and yet it's wonderful? Well, it's kind of like a cancer doctor that or oncologist that has these remarkable cures, but until you find out it's only 2% of his entire patient population had these remarkable cures, if that's all you heard were those 2%, you think, wow, this is a wonderful doctor. This is a wonderful therapy. And you go, well, what about the 98% that actually died? Maybe I'm not, it sort of takes the shine off it a little bit. So looking around, looking before you leap is a great idea.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, hey, thank you so much for talking to me. I know before we had you had mentioned something about doing a group challenge within the group. I absolutely would love to join in with you guys when you do the protein sparing modified modified fast with the group, just so we can compare numbers and
Yeah.
just talk amongst ourselves. I think this will be kind of a cool experience.
We'll set that up. We'll set that up as a challenge, we'll call it. And so everybody sort of starts at the same week and so on and so forth, the beginning and the end. And so we can have people being, there we go. Here's this idea. I'm not going to go too much into predispositions because we're not going to take this long term, but we're going to say, this is
Mhm.
what I would do. Get your stuff ready. Let's start on this day. And then each day we'll sort of check in with everybody on I don't know, webinar or something like that, or a Q&A, or at the very least email, and then summarize the whole experience. But yeah, it would be pretty cool. I mean, that would be good data to come across. So we hope to be doing that probably if we set it up 2 weeks out, then we're looking 3 weeks out to actually do it. Yeah, we'll
Okay, great.
distract. It'll be the reverse of adding weight during our time inside, sheltering in
Oh,
place.
yeah. Also, I definitely want to encourage more people from the group to share more of their food photos because I can't get enough of those in the group. I love that when people are actually taking photos of what they're making. It's the
Oh,
best.
speaking of which, you remind me. So you had sardines, and
Yes,
you had sardines, and you had, what was your meal when you had sardines? You said you had sardines and something else, and
egg
anyway,
whites.
egg whites. There you go. So what Judi got in the process, she goes through these cycles of discovering something, and so what she discovered and modified, and so she has made a bread that is entirely of like 99.99% of egg whites. So
Ooh.
you put it together a little bit and you bake it. Now she'll put it in the group. But anyways, you have this. It looks like bread. It tastes like bread. But so now you can have something like a sardine sandwich, for instance, or whatever else. And I mean, it's a little drier. It
Ooh.
doesn't have the moistness. It's amazing. You can toast it if you want to. You can do all these,
Hmm.
things you can do with bread. But suddenly you have this extra little thing, and you can have it on this diet.
That's awesome. That is awesome. No, I definitely want to check that one out. Whenever
She'll be putting
she's
that
ready
up.
to share that one, I'm all ears.
Okay, good. All right, Brian. Thanks for today. When keep me posted. I mean, I obviously keep you posted what we're doing, but as you continue, just so you can put it in the group saying, "Hey, this is what I dropped, and this is what I'm doing," and so on and so forth. Because it's usually the second and third and fourth time around you really get your flow and you really know how to use this.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'll put something together for the group just to share my experience with everybody because I wasn't actually vocal at all in terms of letting anybody know that I was doing this outside of the previous episode we recorded together. But I'll definitely get something together for everybody to look at. And, if anybody has any questions, of course. But hopefully anybody who does actually see what I was up to, they're a bit wiser than me and have a little bit more success in the interim. But no, I'm looking forward to giving this a shot again. I might actually try it again this week, and then I might hold off till the whole group actually gets together to do it for my third round.
Super, super. Okay. With all that, we'll take care and talk to you later.
Take care, Carl. Thanks again.
Good, good.
Hi, this is Dr. Goldkamp again, and I just want to say I'm pretty excited about this opportunity we have coming up. We're going to be doing a protein sparing modified fast for a group. And feel free to join that group. There will be a link in the show notes below for joining this particular group. It will link you to a Facebook group we'll be setting up temporarily. This protein sparing modified fast will be starting the Tuesday after Memorial Day, and that's in the U.S. I mean, you can do it any place in the world, but it's the Memorial Day in the U.S. is the thing I'm emphasizing here. And we're going to be sending out an email saying these are the things that I would do to get ready for a protein sparing fast for this particular kind of fast. And we'll be sending out an email for the 5 days during the fast. There'll really be 4 days of the fast, and the fifth day will just be kind of a meeting. If you want to join, we'll do a online Facebook Live to go over Q&As and different people's experiences. So some people are going to have really fun results. They'll drop weight and feel great. Others may not have that. And so we're going to talk about the different experiences that people have and why they had those experiences. But for the most part, I think it's something that people really need to be led through so they don't do stupid things. So this is what will be in the Facebook group for any questions that come up. And it certainly will be part of our brief email sequence in the course of that particular time. So if you're interested, click the link below and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.